Are there times that you feel like that you're living in a chaotic world? There's just chaos all around us? Because I know that I do, and I do believe that a lot of us feel that way. So today's guest is Tracy Latz, and we're going to talk about chaotic times. What is it? How can we change that chaos that's around us? Can we change that chaos? What do you think? Is it possible? Stick around to find out how the metaphysical, the metaphysics, and quantum physics and Eastern medicine all play into this. You're going to find out what you can do. So stick around, and please remember, if you're a pet owner, be responsible. Have your pets spayed or neutered. All right, let's get right into it. Tracy Latz, I mean, you are, you've got over 35 plus years of, as an integrative psychiatrist. You have had that clinical experience, like I said, for 35 plus years. You have a BA in biology from Wake Forest University, and MS in immunobiology from Georgetown University, and MD in psychiatry. And again, that's just a fraction of your credentials. And what makes chaos, and what is chaos? Because I think sometimes it means different things to different people.
Yeah, chaos really is when we feel completely disintegrated almost, or near it, in our regular routine of the things that we sort of build our foundations on, that we feel like are always going to be there, or we think will be there in some fashion. And a lot of people right now are sort of bubbling with fear, anxiety, anger, uncertainty. No matter which side of the aisle you sit on. And, you know, I work with people from both sides, and you know, I don't judge anyone no matter where they're coming from. The issue is, how do we navigate this? Because if you listen to the news, and I encourage people not to listen 24 hours a day, it'll make you a little nutty, but to step back and sit with handling your emotions, because chaotic times do often throw us into times of fear. Some people are in despair right now, just out of the fear and the chaos that is going on. People not knowing, you know, what laws are real anymore, what rules are real anymore, and how does that pertain to them? How does it affect our retirement? How does it affect our daily life? How does it affect our children? Because those of us who have the pet pterodactyls, you know, we've kind of done a lot of what we have walked our path to do, and set aside hopefully some monies towards retirement. But a lot of people are coming in going, what's going on with that? What's going on with Social Security, all sorts of things. And we could drive ourselves into hiding in a hole in the ground if we're not mindful. I have a lot of patients, students, people, family coming to me, just really angry, afraid, uncertain, depending on political leanings. There are some people not talking to family again, like it had been in the past in years. And you know, it leads to a lot of stress. And so chaos creates incredible stress in us. We go to that fight or flight, and we go back to that reptilian brain, that posterior part of our brain that's all about survival. It's kill or be killed, you know, and how do I protect myself? And maybe I need to kill you to survive. And it's only when we can calm and get into the more forward, less primitive areas of our brain with connectivity that we can really begin to cooperate with one another, or center ourselves, or tap into our incredible abilities to create in different ways. Yeah. So when I talk to people, you know, I've had therapists who see me because, you know, they need to sort of deconnect to somebody, and they'll have their patients or clients coming to them and telling them things, and they'll say, I sit there and I kind of put on this, oh, it's going to be okay. Let's go over breathing. Let's go over all the mindfulness tools. And then they come to me and they go, I'm sorry to dump this on you, but oh my God, you know, it's horrible, you know, and I go, yeah, you know, it it can be, depending on how you look at it. And so I'll remind them of tools that I've taught them, and some of which we had talked about in our previous podcast. But I also started throwing out there this idea of using some other tools, bypassing, because people are coming in going, I feel so powerless. If our elected officials can't do anything to change the degree of chaos and at least make it manageable, how can we? And I'll take them back and I'll say, well, we are more than a lot of us know. And I started talking to them about national meditation that was going on back in London, England, at the start of the World War, when Hitler had come to power and had invaded Poland. And at that point, when that happened, both England and France stepped forward as solidarity partners and said, we're supporting Poland and we're at war. And that was the beginning of the World War. I'm not likening this to that. Don't get me wrong. There are people who are going to start throwing hands and getting upset. But at that time, a lot of people were very upset and felt very powerless and felt like everything they knew in their world was beginning to crumble or being threatened. And there was a woman named Dion Fortune who started something that later got called the Magical Battle of Britain. And she was stationed in London, and she began a national meditation movement to help people use the abilities of who they are that's bigger than this physical body, bigger than our thoughts and our emotions. And magic, what is that? A lot of people are like, Dr. Latz, you've gone off the deep end. But what I love is even lately, Dean Radin, who was the scientific officer, the primary chief scientific officer of the Institute of Noetic Sciences for years, has really stepped back from that position and really has begun to look heavily into what is the research that has actually been done and is out there for the last 100 years looking at magic and what's magic, because people go, oh my God, it's witches, it's Harry Potter, all of that stuff. And while I often laugh and say my ancient mystery school training I did at an adult Hogwarts school, there's some truth to understanding spiritual training, whether it be in metaphysical understanding or in spiritual understanding or in being trained in clinical medical Qigong. I worked with 2 different practitioners and masters and pursued that certification on 2 lines. And a lot of the primordial Qigong, and some of which we were taught, follows what we're finding out now in science. What we're finding out, is you can, with intention and using sword fingers, you can move energy along energy meridians, just like going to an acupuncturist or going to an energy medicine therapist. But you don't have to put needles in and you don't have to use light, so you can do it with intention. We know prayer, prayer according to, what's the definition of magic? Dean Radin said, well, the definition of magic is technology we don't yet understand yet. And we...
That's I like that. Before we continue with Dean Radin and really the, I don't want to say the science behind fixing this, I was wondering what chaos does to human behavior. How does it change how we act and react, and whether it be news that we take from TV or some sort of social media or the interaction between people? Because I ask this because I spent some time with an older person last night, and this kind of came up, and they said, I don't understand why my grandson's wife, and they just don't like me. And I said,
Yeah.
you too far on one side, and you're pushing your agenda, even though you don't think it is. And this person said, I don't really watch the news. And my thing is, you need to watch a little bit in order to be able to formulate your opinion. You can't just take somebody else's word and then formulate from that and then stick with it, because I think things change or there's variances, but I see people get stuck on one thing because the world is in such a chaos. And then rather than listening to others or watching something and gather information, this is what I've formulated. So how does that affect people as far as behavior goes?
It affects so much, and you're right on with that, because we have created social media where with the logarithms, it used to be when it first came out, you got everyone, all your friends showed up on your feed no matter what. And now people show up on your feed based on logarithms of the sorts of things you've listened to or liked. So only those people show up on feeds. So people who only get news or information on social media, which is a lot of people, they only get things that support their stance, and it drives people further and further and further apart very frequently, because they start thinking, well, everyone thinks this way. When I go on social media, everyone thinks this way. Yes, everyone in your feed now thinks that way. And it just fuels this separateness. And when we get into this us versus them, it causes a lot of people to try and, as you were saying, that wonderful older person who was trying to say, but you need to understand my point of view. And when people say, you need to understand mine, and the other people come back, you need to understand mine, it creates more and more separation and less heartfelt discussions. And to have a heart-to-heart discussion, literally by definition, means I'm in my heart and you're in your heart. And there are tools to get it into your heart, some of which I went over during our last podcast, the loving benefactor meditation, getting centered into your heart, practicing the exercise where you walk through with that, doing that every day where you're walking with your loving benefactor, and it puts you in a compassionate stance where you don't take things as personally and you don't come from this fight or flight realm. So how this separation that becomes bigger and bigger degrees of separation over time, and anger broiling, it creates fear, and all fear goes to guilt, shame, anger, anxiety. So we see increase in depression, increase in anxiety, increase in rage. That includes road rage. That includes, I like to say to people, any one of us could become the shooter in the tower if we had the perfect storm of events going on in our life, where we just feel like there's no point, there's nothing that I built my life on that matters or seems to be stable anymore, and nobody is listening, so I will make them listen, or they'll see, or I don't want to be here anymore. Suicide rates are huge right now. And a lot of people figure if I'm going to take myself out, I'm taking a lot of them, whoever them is. For people who have fear and prejudices, it's against whoever they have a fear or prejudice with. If it's political issues, it's against the opposite political, whether that be international, whether that be spiritual. How many wars have broken out over, separation along those? So this fuels more warring. It fuels more anxiety, depression, lack, futility, us, them. It just does not create a world that many people want to live in anymore. And that's a problem. And we're seeing that problem manifested in mental health. We're seeing it manifested in suicide rates. We're seeing it manifested in what goes on in the news. You know, it's terrible right now.
All of these things, like these emotions of fear, anger, and things like that, it's not just a surface emotion. It does change a chemical, doesn't it, in your body, and it really affects you that way?
Yes,
Does it?
yes, it does. It fuels cortisol levels raising very, very high. And when cortisol level jumps, we will have more anxiety, we will have poorer sleep, we'll have weight gain, that right in the middle weight gain, and everyone's all focused on that and, you know, trying to find the quick fix for losing the weight. It affects your health. So if you're gaining weight, you increase the risk of diabetes, you increase inflammation, because from that wonderful Hogwarts-like training, any anger, any way that we're generating it becomes inflammation. And we know that all illness is inflammation in some form. So, you know, it's so important that people understand what they can do and how they can begin to recenter themselves, because cortisol will drive, with the stress, elevated blood pressure, increased risk of stroke, heart attacks, heart disease. When we close off our heart, which is what we do when we're not in that compassionate stance, when we're there, we open the heart center, and you can see that when you carry someone through that loving, compassionate benefactor meditation, which for folks who missed it, go back and you can listen to the last podcast we did, or you can go to the Shift Your Life TV channel, and we've posted that there along with lots of tools. But when you get into your heart, you naturally relax, muscle tension and pain calms. Those brain waves go from this high beta stress waves that makes it hard for us to really make meaningful, thoughtful choices and decisions. When we calm, we can connect with the higher brain that can use logic, weigh things out, have a little bit more compassion, think things through. Gee, maybe I don't want to go in there and scream at my boss, or, you know, or throw the egg or whatever at the police that's sitting there, whatever it is, you know, the things that get people in trouble. And they were like, I don't know what I was thinking. I'm like, yeah, you were back here.
That's right. You are a Reiki master, but I'm also going to ask you, and this is half joking, half not, is there a magic juice that somebody can drink to help calm those things or to settle things? Or is it something else? Like we're talking, you're going along the ways of meditation, but is there a magic juice, pineapple juice, grapefruit juice, something?
There are some things out there that we found have been very, very helpful. Rhodiola rosea, interestingly, it's RHODIOLA space rosea, ROSEA. You can find it over the counter. It's named for the plant it's derived from. It's been used in Chinese medicine for hundreds of years. In fact, the metaphysicians, before we branched off and got all brainy with pharmaceuticals and Western medicine looking at physical body and medicines, the early pioneers in medicine actually utilized it a lot. It was written about quite a bit in Hermetic medicine. And it seems to be as helpful as Ritalin, crazily enough, with focus and concentration without being anything like Ritalin. It doesn't get people jittery or have caffeine or anything, but it improves focus. And there was a wonderful double-blind placebo-controlled study that showed that in kids. It was a great study. And what they found with that, it not only helped with focus, it improved executive functioning, the aspect of us that kind of thinks things through and doesn't get overwhelmed in a situation, and then can prioritize and put first things first and sequence. None of the ADD meds that we have in Western medicine improve that executive functioning, but rhodiola rosea seems to. It also was shown to sort of support mood and to improve stress resilience. And let's face it, everyone's stressed right now. So I like to talk to my patients, my students, my family about, if you know it's a stressful day or you're in stressful times, see if it's good for you. I'm not your doctor, I'm not your psychiatrist, so check with yours if you have one. There are a few meds that possibly could interact, but it's not a lot of meds with the rhodiola rosea. I tell people to get an organic form of it, because who wants to have a plant that has been sprayed with pesticides that you didn't take and you squish and make a compound that you take? I don't. Maybe you do. But, I always tell people to look at that. There's also an interesting, some of the mushrooms, not the psychedelic ones, but some of the mushroom blends. I recently came across, what is it? And I don't get any kickback. I don't look at that. I just look at what's helpful. There was a super mushroom, like 10 to 12 mushroom blend that seemed to help with stress resilience, sleep, and it helps with all those things, which helps with weight management, because if we're sleeping better, it helps. I always tell people about earthing or grounding, because you can do it for free, putting your bare feet on the earth. And at least where I live, we're now in the warmer part of the year, and people can get out if you're going to be gardening, put some shorts on as your knees are connected. If you're kneeling or you're sitting on something to do gardening, have bare feet, as long as you're not on an anthill, please. But earthing or grounding, those negative ions that flow into the body will naturally improve sleep, therefore lower cortisol. This has all been shown with studies to help with lowering the degree of stress in the body, and it just is a win-win-win-win-win situation.
I'm glad you're saying all this, because a few things. For people that don't really realize it about the grounding, you can almost immediately feel the effect. I mean, just think about you sitting in a chair, and sometimes people have their legs crossed or out in front and crossed, but once you put both feet firmly planted, there's this different feeling that you get. And like I said, if you don't believe it, just do it, and you will feel it. I can almost just like 100% guarantee that. The other thing too about when I said, is there a magic potion you could drink? I asked that because of two things. Caffeine is not going to really help on that part, but I thought about this, and a lot of people they have their coffee, and it's that aroma. It kind of does something to them. So not the coffee part, but tea. For me, I do the chamomile. It's hot. The aroma calms me, and then I drink it. And whether it's just a mental thing, that mental thing I think translates to the physical, and it helps. I might sound like a nutcase right now, and there it is.
Sipping on my tea. You're not nutty. Yep. There are different teas and combinations and essential oils, things that can calm. Lavender, we hear about that a lot. Now they make lavender tablets. I had dinner with a friend of mine the other night, and she's a psychologist. And she said, you ever use lavender? I said, yeah, oil all the time. I recommend it to folks who have kids who are anxious. You can spritz it on your bed or put it in a little locket that wafts up, and it does have a calming effect on many people. She said, no, there are teas now of lavender. And she goes, there's lavender they've made into these melt sort of lozenges or pills you could take. I was like, well, who knows? It's pretty cool. There's also orange oil. the best one I ever saw was one I got in Egypt, but you can get it, orange blossom oil. And if you take that, now this is again based on my metaphysical training, you take a little bit of orange oil and you put it like just a little bit underneath, like 2 or 3 finger widths below your belly button, which is where second chakra or lower dantian is. It's where the emotional one lives, your inner child. So if you take a little bit of that orange blossom oil and put it there, it does have a calming effect. I once had a fella, I've used different tools and techniques. I had a fella in my office who was really angry. I had two. One, I used the Qigong emotional release technique. It's a very quick way to, if you have an overwhelming emotion of fear or anger, you can typically drop it quickly. And if that doesn't work, then I move to EFT. And we have demonstration videos for both of those. But, there are ways of centering yourself in lower dantian or down into your heart, at least. Simple things. This is sort of emergency stuff that we did in medical Qigong and energy medicine, where you put your hand on the upper part, because this is where we're overthinking, right? And then you take your other hand and you put it over your heart. And it can sometimes, for people who are like, I can't think to use the stuff you taught me, I'll be like, put your hand right here, put your hand right here. Calm. I also used to keep a bottle of orange blossom oil in my office, and I had a couple of folks who were really angry and upset, and when they were really overwhelmed, or you could see they were going to panic, some of them had PTSD, some just had rage issues, and I would go over and get the orange blossom oil, open it up and go, smell. People have to find what works for them, because for me, yes. Chamomile, I was like, yay, let's try the chamomile. For me, chamomile wakes me up. I'm backwards. Wakes me up and gets me very focused. Don't know why. Doesn't seem to do this to a lot of other folks, but I used to, when I was doing taxes, I would drink chamomile tea. And now I do rhodiola rosea, and if I needed the chamomile tea.
I'll say one thing that's interesting that you're talking about oranges, because I did not know that, but what I have been doing is I've been eating a lot of oranges, but I've been taking the orange peel and putting it in my chamomile.
That works.
Yeah.
When I had a trip to China, going up the sacred mountain and the 10,000 steps up the mountain with a bunch of people much younger than me. That was a wonderful trip, but it was exhausting. When we got up to some of those Taoist temples that were up at the top, and we were doing our primordial Qigong and star-stepping Qigong, we went into this one place and they said, do you want some 1,000-year-old tea? And I was like, 1,000-year-old tea? What's that look like? And they came out and they had, when they opened it up, I looked in and I said, those are orange peels that they saved, and they would dry and they would hold on to them until they were very, very old. They would become very, very dried, and they would make a tea out of it, in addition to having some green tea or something that they had. But they oftentimes would do a tea just of that. I actually brought some of it back with me, kind of like, this is strange, but it was intriguing and it was calming. It really was calming.
Wow. For the folks who are listening, and we read off some of your credentials at the beginning, and then now we said you are a Reiki master. You're also into holistic medicine and everything else. And there are so many things from the Eastern world that I think we, on the Western side, we just don't know so much about. I mean, I also make a tea out of, I think, what is it called? I've got a big bag of it too, the black tree fungus. Mm-hmm. And then I use, after I have a tea out of that, I sometimes will save some of the stuff and I'll put it on with my rice and I'll eat it. Yeah. Not a whole lot. I don't know if it's good for you that way, but I was like, hey.
It can be interesting to open your mind to different approaches. I've worked with people with crystals. Sounds strange, but there is a scientific basis also to crystals, which crystals have a dominant oscillatory resonance. Different crystals have different DORs. And we know, because people are like, oh, I was looking on the internet, and what seems to be the big thing now is, learning how to use sound healing. And I'm like, yeah, we were trained in color and sound healing in the ancient mystery school, using tuning forks, using colored pomanders, which came from natural crystals and flowers, just for toning and not laying hands on, but just being in the etheric body, the body double of the physical body that permeates this, and being able to shift things. Or even, this is going to sound strange, in some of the training we had, you replace organ systems in the body or issues etherically, and that's a reflective etheric healing process that was very powerful, that you certainly don't hear about except for in some metaphysical training and some books that were from the early 1900s. But there are lots of ways to come in through a holistic lineup. In my office, I have set up for folks who just sort of can't sort out where the entry point is for them. They'll say, I've been to my physical doctor, I went to a Reiki master or an energy medicine practitioner. I felt great when I left, and I felt great for 1 hour or a week, but then it all came back, so it didn't work. I said, no, it worked. I said, the issue is what you're missing, because I'll say we have physical body, which is really organic matter. It's earth, we're animating. Then we have an etheric field, which permeates this. It's the vitalizing body, or the etheric body. It's how we plug who we really are as a spiritual being to animate this clay that we're animating. But whatever is going on with this etheric template, whatever that is, it's sort of like having an architect that you go to design a house, and then the builders theoretically are supposed to and have to build exactly to that plan. Well, think of the etheric body as the plan, and these physical cells, atoms, and molecules must align up with whatever this etheric field is. Now, that some people, that's like, that sounds nutty, but it explains how prayer, how Reiki, how acupuncture, because this etheric field, as it gets into the body and flows, that's the energy meridians. The energy meridians are not some physical thing. In medical school we learn, vein, artery, nerve, next, and that's kind of everywhere in the whole body, vein, artery, nerve. So when we started being told what little we were told back with my pet pterodactyl then about acupuncture and energy meridians, I was like, okay, wait, we did gross anatomy, vein, artery, nerve, where's the other? And it's not. It's an energetic flow, which I fully understood some more when I did the ancient mystery school training, and then understood a heck of a lot better when I trained with 2 Qigong masters, because we had to understand all of the energy meridians and do processes for working with them and sealing them and doing tests, where at one point, to test to see if we'd done it, we had like a don't do that at home. We had a chopstick that we placed right here and just shoved it and it would explode. But we had to practice and build up our chi and be tested for that. So we began to really understand what working beyond this to energize and create this is more and more vital. You can boost this, which has a powerful effect on everything in your body. Outside of that, you have the emotional field, where we hold the energies of our go-to emotions, whether that's fear, anger, kind of a lot going on right now, or this, anything that is not of this, I'm open, I'm calm, I'm in my heart. Anything else is some form of fear. And so that, when we carry that in our emotional body, which is further out than the etheric, it has a powerful impact on the etheric, which then has an impact on the physical. Outside of that emotional body, we have our thought field. So our thoughts can have an impact. And we know this now. We know through Power of Eight groups. You know, that became the big thing. Power of Eight, oh my goodness, it's a new thing. And all these books and groups all over the country and the world were doing Power of Eight groups focused, you know, sitting at least 8 people in a group and focusing on one person sitting in the middle or one concept for that certain period of time, and then seeing whatever healing or change happened. And we also know from big meditation groups that when giant groups of people meditate on like peace in an area, or the one big study was looking back, I don't know if it was in the early 70s, there was a lot of unrest going on in DC, and a lot of protests and a lot more violence and violent crimes. And so there were a group of people who decided to get together. It was a large group, and they said, we are going to have a meditation that will be nonstop for a week. So people will come in shifts. So one person would say, I'll be in the first group, and then before that group left, the other people would come in, sit, begin their meditation, get centered into it, the other people would leave. They would stay for a shift, and then other people would come in. So they kept that up for 7 days. When they looked back at the crime rate and data, they found crime dropped drastically during that time. So that was kind of a clue. There was some stuff going on. And what we understood then from Power of Eight groups is you can take a smaller group of people and do it. And people who have been members of prayer groups know this. There's also distant healing networks. I've been involved in one for probably the last 15, 18 years, where I don't know who the person is, but all of us get assigned somebody, and you know, you don't advertise it and go, I'm doing this, and guess what I'm doing? You just set your intention, you do whatever modality you do or that they've requested, because you don't want to put them in fear and do something other than, you know, and it has an effect.
Hopefully I'm not really going off track, but is that in a way like a quantum physics thing?
Yes.
You know, because that's what it sounds like.
We now know in quantum physics, because back when I had my pterodactyl, I was in 4th grade and kind of learning the first time atoms, you know, atoms make up molecules. It was like, yay. And I was a sciencey person. I was intrigued. But I remember looking at the model, and they had that spiked model where they had the nucleus and then these spikes coming out. And you had, you know, we had all the protons, neutrons, electrons. And I thought, that's really cool. And they said they spin around. And I remember thinking, how? If they're all this physicality, but you just took it, you had to have faith. Okay, it spins around. What we know now, you know, we found there are now tinier molecules, and what is understood in quantum physics now is in an atom. An atom. Only 4 to 6% of that atom is physical. 94 to 96% of the atom is what they call dark energy. Doesn't mean it's bad, it's not Voldemort, you know. It's dark energy, kind of like yang and yin, right? And we look at, you know, yang and yin. Yang is physical, and it's that white. When you look at the Tai Chi symbol, you know, the dark, the unseen is the feminine, the spiritual, the unseen. Like the moon is yin, the sun is yang. It's masculine, and it's out there doing. But what we know is we've got in one little atom, most of that space is this nothingness of dark energy. And they were like, what is that? And what is it that influences the atom to actually manifest in the world in this way versus that way, or molecules to then, because if we've got all of these atoms being built and most of it is not physical, it is other than, what influences that? And what they have found out is it's us. our thoughts and our emotions, our consciousness, which is our astral field, is our thoughts and our emotions, different from our spiritual aspect. Okay? But because of who we are as these spiritual beings, we do have the power to create in wondrous ways. Most people don't realize we're creating every moment of every second with the power of our emotion, that emotional child, that that lower dantian, that inner child aspect that gets so mad or gets so excited, or gets so afraid. That is the power behind everything we create. When I teach, I talk about the bow and arrow theory of creation, where pulling back the bow powerfully is what our inner child does with a powerful emotion, whether it be anger, fear, great love, compassion. And the arrow that shapes how that energy manifests is our thought.
To me, it's like, I mean, we're talking about chaotic times, but also to me, this is kind of telling me in a way that chaos is always here. Chaos is part of us. We can control chaos. Sort of like that chaotic thing that we're talking about, but chaos, we can control chaos. I don't know how else to put it. But I might be going off the wrong end, the deep end, but that's what I'm thinking and that's what I'm understanding.
Absolutely. And that is the power of who we are. And that's why I love the fact that Dean Radin stepped back from continuing just sort of helping run the scientific endeavors of ions. I love that he is sort of talking now about, what is reality, and talking about magic. And I'm not talking like pull a rabbit out of the hat sort of stuff. I'm talking about the unseen world, the magic that makes prayer work, the magic that makes intention work. Because a lot of people are like, law of attraction, I'm putting, and I love that. Law of attraction is a real thing, but a lot of people got into the sort of law of attraction. I found this wonderful little thing, that had this, I could put a dollar bill on the ceiling and I could look at it, and all I have to do is look at it and I'm going to create a wealth. And I'll be like, maybe. Yes, it is possible, but it also depends on where you go. Are you like, oh, I'm going to put this up there, I think I could do it, but it never works for me. I never, none of us in my family have ever, how powerful are you pulling back that bow to shoot the arrow of, I'm going to be wealthy? Yeah, because if you're not pulling it back much, it's kind of like, I want to go on a diet. I want to go on a diet like everyone else. I want to lose all the weight like all the celebrities. But look at the chocolate chip cookies, and you'll see, what am I going to create with? And that's kind of where we talked before about self-sabotaging. But you can find a pathway that helps you be centered, because if we can be more in our heart, and we are creating from our heart, it is a game changer for things going on in our physical body, because we're calming down the astral portion of who we are, the emotions and thoughts. And so the flow of energy or chi or life force or prana, whatever you want to call that, from our spiritual aspect, whatever it is, that aspect of us, our that's connected to God, source, universe, the whatever you want to call that, because people fight over names. I don't care what you call it. But whatever that is that's flowing in has the ability to have miraculous healing physically, also miraculous changes in what's going on around us. So when you begin to understand, if I can center in my heart, and this is what that whole magical Battle of Britain was about, and that's why when I talked to a few people and more people and metaphysical friends around me, they said, do it, we need someone to do it. I said, yeah, someone needs to do it. And they finally said, you need to do it. And so I did. The last week of February, I started what I'm calling the Magical Battle of America. No one's fighting, we're not going after anybody, And it's not even getting into an us them. It's a nonpartisan. Anyone can participate. It's not throwing hate balls or voodoo sticking pins in anything. What it is centering. And there are very specific steps. We're using the step of the meditation that was exactly as was used by Dion Fortune back in the World War. And once we centered, you sit in a certain manner to kind of protect your energy so that you're not influenced by other things while you're in the middle of it. And you face, in their day, they face toward London. I'm having everyone face towards DC. And we're sitting in that way wherever you are, and you don't have to do it at the time that everyone else is. It's a very individual practice. It's all written out, and the focused intention for the week is set. And what we do is once we're in our heart, we sense ourselves connecting to the group soul of the nation, or the group soul of humanity, to work bigger than the country. And once you connect with group soul, you already know ahead of time what the focused intention for that week is. And so you will have spent some time sitting with that before you do your meditation. The actual meditation takes 5 to 15 minutes to do daily. And you dedicate yourself to whatever time that works for you. But what you do once you center here, you already know what we're working on, and you've already come up with a symbol or an image that makes sense to you. It doesn't have to be something that makes sense to anyone else. But once you are connected to that group aspect, the all or one and one or many aspect, then once you're there, you impulse whatever that image is while you're still just in your heart. You're not thinking, how is this going to work and how am I going to make it? Nope, we're just impulsing the image. And you don't stay there for any longer than 5 minutes, because a lot of people are not trained in sort of these more metaphysical meditations, and they'll start going to monkey mind. So before you go to monkey mind, what you do is you just picture that there is this black curtain. This is exactly how Dion did it. That slowly sort of closes on that, because what it does is it allows that to keep working. But boom, now it separates your energy from it, and then you take your feet and you stomp them. You do something to ground yourself back here in the here and now, and that's it. But you do that every day. And we've moved through, I kind of thought, let's start with the core concepts of, what this Constitution, democracy was found on. And if we had stuck to those core concepts, we never would have had some of the ways that we went awry immediately, like slave and that kind of stuff. Yeah. But starting with, we started the last week of February with balanced equality. So we started very basically. We're getting more metaphysical, and some people would be like, it's a little out there. But we started with balanced equality, then did all-seeing discretion, did that for a week. Then we did active accountability, then political tolerance, then rule of law, because that's a basis of our Constitution, then transparency, then freedom. And then I thought, okay, everyone's ready. Everyone knows the process now. And anyone can still join. That's not like a closed thing. Anyone can. I have a landing page. You don't have to give your email. You don't have to give anything. You just go to the page. It's updated every Saturday evening for the beginning of the new meditation every Sunday. On week 8, we called on spiritual masters, whatever that means. And for me, a group of 5 to 7 showed up. Depends, just call on spiritual masters and energize a bridge from that assistance, really asking for assistance for all of humanity, for the nation, just to come in. Again, nonpartisan. And then this past week, it was these spiritual beings begin to form kind of like a diamond of light. They kind of meld and create this circle. In my mind, it seems like a diamond, a brilliant diamond of light. Out of every aspect and facet are coming what's called the seven rays, which is a metaphysical concept which balances out, everything is based on the seven rays. We have seven chakras, we have seven primary musical notes in an octave. There's just so many things that go in. So all of those colors and energies have a way to work on everything. But the whole reason we are going to group soul rather than to group consciousness is because group consciousness can be influenced by your social media feed, by what's being fed you there, by propaganda, by misunderstanding, all of those things. So what we're doing, and people have said, well, how long are we going to do this? And I go, I'm just going to keep it up. It's sort of taken off. I've got a number of folks who are, initially people said, could you do a Facebook page? So I did, but I found no one wants to post on it. And so many people are like, I don't want to be on Facebook anymore. I had other people who said, do a Discord page. So I said, okay. But, a lot of the, young whippersnappers are on that, but people like me are like, what's that? So I finally said, you know what? I am just going to do where if people go to a page and they visit it whenever they want, they can see the whole, how you do the meditation and what the focused intention is for the week. And I'm just going to keep it up until we feel like we're not in chaos.
Tell us how we get there.
Good question. It's on shiftyourlife.com, but if you just Google or go in your browser, whatever that is, and look up Magical Battle of America. And there's the first page was a blog that I did. So there'll probably be two things that come up in the Google realm or the search realm. One is the blog post just sort of talking about the magical battle of Britain and the school of thought about that, and some about how Dean Radin is showing us that magic is really active every day. It's not what we used to think it was. And the other one is the focused intent. I can send you the link and you can post it if you'd like. That's fine.
Okay. For those who are still with us and going, what's this about metaphysical and everything else that's spiritual and all this? I'm going to try to simplify this in my words and correct me when I'm off, because I have no credentials like you. So in my layman's terms, control what is the closest thing to you. You are the closest thing to you yourself. Yes. When you control yourself, like you said, your heart and center, that will radiate out. You can project that. And then you have multiple people, and as you're saying, you face the direction of DC or wherever it is. Get that centered, control yourself, project. The more people that do it, it will radiate and it will travel that distance. Because once again, if we're talking metaphysics, if we're talking quantum physics, it's not just happening here.
That's right.
Same thing's happening over there. So that's my layman term of a guy who has no knowledge about this stuff.
And for people who think intention won't work, I tell people all the time, if you do that exercise, I don't know if we did that last time, where you line up the creases on each of your wrists, and then you bring your fingers up and you see, are they even at the tops? If they are, great, then you can pick whichever hand you want. If they're not, choose the hand that has the shorter fingers, and you put that one up in the air, the other one in your lap, and you just focus on that one hand. And you see, sense, or feel that this beautiful golden white light is beginning to flow through that hand, filling in between every cell, molecule, and atom, filling in between every single knuckle, filling it, stretching the fingers longer, 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 and it just keeps flowing and stretching. And even in that short period of time, it's already not quite a quarter of an inch longer on one side for me. Now, we could keep that up and it would get longer. Now, don't take my word for it. Try this, because you'll begin to kind of go, wait a minute, maybe I am more than I knew. And this is how, when people we've finally gotten a little wise and we're using mindfulness, and a lot of the pain clinics, it started more in California and has moved across the country, of people being aware that you can focus on areas of the body and get them to decrease pain. Or in medical Qigong, we tell people to see like an icicle of Qi or light, kind of with the point of it being at the point of pain, and that it's melting, this light is melting into that space. And you'll just find the Qi, the change, will improve situations. And this is the premise upon which I changed some physical things going on in my body. But I also have been involved in doing healing work from afar with people, and it's the same concept. And it's the same concept when you do prayer and group prayer. It works because we are all connected up at this level. And by impulsing this level, then seeds of light or information or influence can trickle down to help calm everyone, so that we're not so much like this, and maybe can find the way, a pathway to really work together as people in politics, in international realms, whatever. And I think this is the hope for humanity.
Well, Tracy, if I can call you Tracy, Dr. T. We talked a lot about, I'll call it it's not a cure, so I can't use that word, but we talked about how to deal with this chaos. Yeah. But we didn't ever really mention how we got here. And before we close out, I was wondering if you could give us a couple minutes of how we got here, and then leave it at that for people to think about how we got here, and then how you're going to use what Dr. Tracy talked about to help yourself and to help humanity, because it starts with you, I think, to make that difference.
Absolutely. And we all sort of got here when we started buying into whatever our group that we're hanging out with begins to talk about, of us and them. Whenever someone is talking us and them, we need to kind of stop and realize, I am them and they are me. And where is the missing link? What is the fear that we're holding on to that is creating the separation? And when we talk with people, to be able to not just sitting there and be in our head about, I'm waiting for them to finish saying what they're saying and I already know how I'm coming back at them, but to really mindfully hear their concerns, and then be in your heart to come back. And if we can all be in our heart using some simple tools, just very simple tools. When we think of loved ones, we get into our heart. And, for people who just say, I can't get along with this person, they're always going to be there like pecking at me, and I have to be around them, there's tools to not take that personally as well. It's called the La Cucaracha technique. And you sort of, it's called that because it means the cockroach. And what you do is you picture them like a cockroach. Not that you're going to squish them, I'm going to get them. But you just get into a more humorous stance of, if they're not being abusive of you, if they're being physically, emotionally, sexually abusive, remove yourself. Don't just stay there and say, I'm supposed to try and deal with it. But with that approach, you picture them as if they were this giant insect or cockroach and ant, and they've got arms and they've got an extra set of legs coming out the side, and then their lower legs are the bottom legs, so they have 3 pairs of legs, and they're wearing like their human clothes, but they've got antenna. And you'll find you just kind of start laughing, and you stop being like, I've got to get them, I've got to get them. Because getting into rage will get us into trouble, whether we're driving or in our daily life. It just doesn't help.
So true. Dr. Tracy Latz, Thank you very much. And just to let folks know again, it's shiftyourlife.com,
That's
correct?
correct.
For your main website.
That's correct. And I will give you the link to the magical battle if you want to. You can put it under your video if you like.
Yeah. I've always enjoyed, the couple of times that we've had our conversation, because I learn a lot from you. And then it opens my mind to thinking other ways. And I often, and I think I'm like many people, we learn today, we forget tomorrow. And so it's nice to have this constant reminder of how to make change, how to better ourselves, or how to open these new doors. So thank you very much.
Thank you. It's a joy to be here. And I love chatting with you. It's just fun.
Thanks. Until next
All
time.
right. Take care.
Thanks.